Okay, we're at interview number 8.
Whoa,
We're already at 8. That's crazy. I gotta figure out who to get for 10. Gotta do a
dude,
crazy guess.
that's big.
Introduce yourself, man.
Whoa, my name is EMORY. I do music stuff in certain contexts. I'm trying to think. Technology vibes.
Yeah.
It's funny trying to like define. It's like define yourself. Like
Especially
damn,
with
I
you,
don't
I feel
even
like
know.
that's like the craziest question. That's
This is so
the
funny.
simplest question to ask, yet it's the craziest for you, I think. It's pretty
Dude,
awesome.
Yeah, it's funny.
So for like a basic rundown, I guess, like the way I describe what you do, and like I've heard other people describe what you do, is like you're a guitarist, but you mainly function in a world of crafting technology to like make music and crafting
Yo.
technology to do visual stuff as
Hell
well, like
yeah.
all from scratch. Would you say that's pretty accurate?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's from scratch is such a interesting because I feel like you can go down multiple layers, but then it gets to this thing of like, did you build the computer? Like, did you build
Yeah.
whatever? So it's like, but yeah, definitely from like a level that is like uncomfortable to like a lot of like people. I feel like generally to go about like doing something, it's like using like smaller blocks instead of bigger blocks.
Yeah.
But it's always yeah, man. I totally think of it as like I started like I feel like in my soul I just want to like play guitar with my friends, and so but then yeah, it's funny, like there's a bunch of like stuff like career vibes and like what are we like most useful like to everyone else to do, and I'm like I feel like I'm totally going in the technology like area, but man, there's something about just playing like guitar is just so like I don't think you can just like substitute one for the other, like it's very like special.
So you're from Texas, I think.
Yeah.
Yes? So what was your childhood like musically? Like, how did you get into music? What age did you get into music?
That's so
Roughly
real.
around?
Like I feel like I was always just like fucking with it whenever I could. Like I remember like I tried like the like piano shit when I was like 5, and I just had like a weird teacher like me. I just didn't fuck with being taught like that, and so then I thought I didn't fuck with it. But yeah, I was always like just fucking around, and like a big one that I like look back on now that was interesting was like taking, because my parents, I remember when my parents both got like iPhones, I would just record myself like doing some like table drums or something with one of them, and then put the other phone up to the first one's like
Speaker?
yeah, and then just kind of go back and forth, and then it would just kind of devolve into like noise sometimes.
Wow.
But it was super like it would, and my parents would always just be like Matt, like give us our phones back, because I would ask both of them for their phones without telling the other, and then that like which is just like a funny like tape. It reminds me of like tape machine workflow now or something, but it's
You're basically doing tape looping, like a very primitive form of it.
I thought that was interesting. I feel like there's a lot of weird like things like that that'll keep like happening with like young kids with technology, where like you kind of like follow the archetypes of the stuff that existed without like knowing what's if you're just like being curious and like childlike with it.
And when did you start playing guitar?
Man, it was funny. I guess I started playing trumpet in like 4th grade.
I also started playing trumpet in
Hell
4th grade.
fucking
I was
yeah,
a trumpet
dude.
kid, yeah.
That's so weird. And then I think I did bass like the next year, and then guitar the next year, and then that kind of hooked me.
What hooked you about the guitar?
Honestly, like the craziest, I mean, probably the social aspects like of it, of just like
Really?
playing guitar in like a group with like, and then like starting a band, and like that whole like social dynamic was, and I mean, I remember like kids who like were playing guitar, and just because there was already a better guitar player would just start playing bass, and then they literally like are like 10 years later like the bass player. Like it's really interesting. I feel like how the social dynamics will form our like decisions with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's funny, like I think the trumpet I thought about a lot, so it was like a very like pure like decision of like to work on like that instrument, and then like even like still. But it's funny with guitar, like, and I had like a really weird like I never got taught guitar like correctly or any like, so I didn't like learn. I wish I'd like learned to read when I was like learning, because I ended up just teaching myself a bunch of shit kind of wrong. And like like with trumpet, when I approach it, it's just very like I can just read things.
Yeah,
it's just a very straightforward experience.
I had a very similar experience with trumpet.
Sense.
Yeah, I I learned how to sight read on guitar because of trumpet. Because
Yeah.
I realized that, you know, because the sheet music is just a whole step apart. So I was like, oh, I can just like practice sight reading
Hell
guitar if I
yeah.
just sight read trumpet. But yeah, I had a very similar experience. So did you play in bands at all in high school?
Man, oh yeah, in high school, yeah, that was a big, like, there was this punk band like Naked in Public that I would play with.
That's a
It was
great
like because
name.
they had a school thing they were doing, and they I think one of the requirements is like you can't name your group anything inappropriate, and they're like, well, we're Naked in Public, and it
That's
was like
awesome.
I don't know, I played with a group that was like a surf rock group, which was like funny. It was like a really it's like really specific, like kind of techie like shit, but it was really like it would always be like in shows with like a bunch of like goofy like punk bands and stuff. So it's like funny the like I don't even know what is it called.
The just like the ecosystem that you're thriving
Hell
in.
yeah. I was gonna say like the pipelines.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
And what part of Texas are you from?
Dallas,
Okay.
Texas.
So there, I'm assuming there's probably a pretty poppin' music scene there at that time in
Honestly,
high school.
yeah, and
Yeah.
like it's all the suburbs, like the Denton like scene, which is kind of like 50 miles up or something, and just all the stuff like outside of it is super like vivid. Like it's very, especially just like house shows. There's never like
Yeah.
you're never like getting like the house shows never like cap. Like they never because the places are so much bigger because it's Texas, so there's like a
Yeah.
yard and everything.
That's great.
It's
So,
real.
you decided to go to Berkeley. Now, did you go intending to study guitar originally, or had you been working with this technology stuff throughout like your time in high school?
That is so I it was funny because I auditioned for the art like magnet school in my town, and I didn't get in like freshman year because I kind of like I think I had like a teacher at the time, and he told me a bunch of stuff like very like incorrectly. Like he was telling me to work on this one piece, but it was like you like couldn't use that to get in, kind of like I
Oh,
kind of it was kind of fucked up, and I like yeah I didn't make it into that, but so like in my brain I was like, oh okay, I have to just do computer science now, like that's the like this means I'm not meant to do music. Like I just and then I just was kind of doing like coding stuff for a while, and then I got like kicked out of that school, kind of like soft kicked out, and then like just practiced a lot, and then made it into the art school like my senior year, which is like really good. So I totally came into Berkeley with like a weird like I'd gone kind of full circle and realized like I couldn't just do like coding stuff. Like
you
I
needed
have
to supplement that with
yeah,
something
I have
else.
like an artist brain, and it was super like even just the way you like educate in like the computer science kind of like straight ahead path, just all of the math stuff. Like I mean, I don't even know if I could do it. Like I feel like I could, but I like it would probably be like really really hard to like get my and I would have to like force my brain into like a box or so. Whereas Berkeley, it's funny that when I got here, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna do music, and it took like over a year for me to be like, wait, like music and technology. Like, what if I just smush them together?
Yeah, so
Like,
that happened after a year that you got here, and what
yeah,
was your first forays into that? Like, what were some of your first forays?
man, honestly, like. I feel like Max MSP was just the big. I guess it's just called Max now, but it was like, or Max is what it's called now, not called Max now. But it like yeah it's really like special of an environment because it's very like visual, and so it's the kind of thing where it's I feel like anytime you're making things you're just using like are you just using one block to make it, or are you using a couple big blocks that you put together? I feel like a guitar like a pedal board, like you're
Hmm.
kind of using these bigger blocks versus like then in Max there's like kind of a beginner area that called like Beep, and then there's like a visual one called Visi, where it's kind of just these bigger blocks, but they're smaller than most areas. So it's like interesting to just like build things, and like yeah, that was definitely
And you were
like
just messing around with sounds at that point for your guitar mainly?
honestly what really like pushed me down the path, which I like was very unexpected to me, was like synthesis. Like I because I always like
Generative synthesis?
and yeah that's what caught me after a while, but even just the idea of like designing a synth from scratch, or like retracing the steps of like the Prophet 5 or just the DX7 or
Yeah.
whatever, like archetype like really archetypal synths and sounds and stuff was very like for like I it snuck up on me, and then I feel like learned like a huge amount of, especially just like doing stuff. I feel like doing things by ear, it's funny that like Berkeley gets up to ear training for, and then I had this joke that like some of the EPD, they don't really enforce it in the classes, but they kind of suggest it, this aspect of, if it is kind of like ear training 5, where you start going, instead of like, okay, these are the notes and then the intervals, and most people don't like pursue it like this, but there is like John Chowning, the inventor or like discoverer of FM synthesis, had this whole kind of manifesto thing that was so interesting about like the future of composition through like FM synthesis, where you start like, instead of just viewing notes as like one note thing, like, or like kind of
A
subconsciously,
note
like,
is a note. Like the note
yeah.
C is the note C. Instead of viewing it as that, what did he view it as more?
Well, it's interesting that with FM you can kind of pull any of the harmonics out of any note
So you
and
start
like
to get
move them.
really crazy
Yeah,
upper
like you
structure
could,
stuff.
yeah, for sure, like in just each note at a time, but then also in like the way you, when you play chords, like it's just such a, like you can play the same notes but then have such a drastic difference in the timbre, that
Yeah.
in a way like that there's not like a notation, and like there's all the abstract, I think it meets honestly right at where all the super abstract like acoustic kind of like the super out like composer people, I feel like,
Like in the classical
yeah, and
world,
the
yeah.
super like, what I forget though, I feel like just the super out like composer classical people like meet right with where like the way they have their like alternate like notated scores
Yeah,
kind
like a
of
John Zorn or like a Steve Reich or
do
something
all,
like
yeah,
that,
all, I feel
yeah.
like all of that stuff, it's super interesting where
That's
like
cool.
trying to, yeah, like view like ear training kind of in a way of like the timbre along with the notes, and like what
Yeah.
are the like the harmonics, I guess, kind of I don't know, it's interesting, but that kind of thing really like,
That struck you when you first
yeah,
got into it?
yeah, it's so interesting. And I've like really recently, I mean like within the last like week or two, like really been kind of coming back around to like, I think too, my like main focus right now is like getting my trumpet playing like kind of to like at least to the peak of where I've been in the past, like physically, and then working on like the live effect processing kind of stuff for trumpet, which is, it's funny that like that's kind of where I would have, what I would have done immediately in like 8th grade or something, that I like kind of had to go through this
Once
whole
again,
like
the full circle
cycle, yeah,
thing.
of just like kind of discovering things like from scratch and coming back around to being the artist like at the bit, which is like, is funny.
So I met you, the first time I think I like really met you was at the Cambridge Community Center
Oh
last
hell
year,
yeah,
and you
totally
were wearing
remember.
your awesome helmet.
Hell yeah, dude.
But the first time I met you in a professional setting was you did, I think it was the ski club tour, and you did the light stuff for
Oh
one of our
yeah,
shows at the Thunderdome.
hell
I think it was
yeah,
that show, but that was the first time I'd really like interacted with you on that level. We
hell
talked a
yeah,
few times before. How did you get into doing the like because the way you approach the visual side of live music is really creative. You know, you have this whole thing that you've developed where you can control what's going on in real time. Like you're improvising along with the
hell
musicians.
yeah.
How did you delve into that aspect of it? Did that come later in your work with like, because it is kind of like a form of synthesis, I guess
Hell
you could
yeah.
say. Did that come later on, or was that sort of like pretty apparent when you started working with this type of stuff?
Hell yeah, dude. That seems accurate. Like, what is it? I think it was like my 3rd semester when they let you start doing the EPD classes. That it's like I was using the bigger blocks for synthesis, which is
Mm-hmm.
called beep. And then my 4th semester, I started really messing more with the blocks for video like processing stuff, and they had them right next to each other. It's funny, at Berkeley they just never really mention like it exists like kind of on an equal like standing in the software in Max, but it's, they don't really like teach it or anything, and it's just funny. I
The
just,
tools for one are the same tools for the other, pretty much. Is that kind
it
of the
they're, it's like
general?
it's like there's a group, they're like kind of totally separate, but they're like right next to each other, and they're like very like in parallel.
Yeah.
But then there are a lot of like super interesting, I feel like that's where it starts becoming like more high level too, interesting ways where you can control, like you can use one thing to control the video and the audio, and the audio at the same. But
Yeah.
what really like struck me about it for sure was when I really started messing with it. I'm like, oh wait, this is this. It's like you're doing, instead of like a normal like video, or I mean audio signal, it's kind of just like another dimension of the signal. Like it's like a two-dimensional signal instead of a one. So it's kind of like it's not the same. Like you can never just plug one into the other, because you're dealing with like the matrix, I guess, of it's like the RGB like values, like the three, and then I think there's like an alpha or something is the four, is like generally what I would be dealing with. Where then like when you're, but like once you just, if you like kind of smush those all together inside of like a different colored like digital cable, and you're like, okay, this is the video signal. Like when you look at it, it's the same. A lot of, I mean, doing like really, it's interesting how it lines up. I made a pedal board pretty much with it, where it's just kind of like the distortion, delay, like, and it's like the exact same like concepts,
But just for visual things.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
really cool.
Yeah, being applied to like almost like just a two-dimensional signal versus a one-dimensional signal.
Yeah.
And it's like really interesting. I have this whole thing of like I feel like music in my head is just kind of the, if you have a space-time graph of like how like art is perceived, that there's kind of like visual art is kind of at like this like maybe like top left or bottom left or something, of like being like you perceive it, it's like it's
frozen in time.
Versus music is kind of the opposite,
and you're bridging
spectrum.
those two gaps in the spectrum in your head. You're just flying around.
Yeah, and I feel like it's like kind of interesting because it's not necessarily like in the middle of the two. I feel like I've just kind of like taken, especially too because I'm super like, I like have super bad eyes, and I think I like developed kind of weird where like I can't really visualize things in my head like much, just from, I think, or I mean, usually it's like to the level of like when I take my glasses off, where it's just kind of like shapes and like blurs and stuff. So I'm like, I can't really like visualize exactly what I want in my head, like to make
you just have to do it.
But yeah, it's super like, I feel like it's just pushing. I guess what I like doing for like live shows and stuff, and the reason it works so well is it's like pulling the visual like stimulus aspect into the exact same time domain as like music, where I mean it's interesting like using a Nintendo controller to like
that's one of your, that was one of the things that you,
I love that. It's so kind of gimmicky too, but it's such a good like,
it's really practical. It's like,
it really is. Yeah,
that's the thing about like all the stuff that you make. Like when I talk about it with somebody like Berger or Abby or somebody like that, it's always like, man, like it's fucking crazy, but then it's like the mediums that you get these really high concept things into, and like the mediums by which you control them are like really like, oh duh, like that's so I've like using a video game controller to like control live sound, like that's such like a duh, like why didn't anybody think of that?
Dude.
I want to ask you to show the people the glove.
Oh,
the
yeah,
glove.
Dude.
This has been a thing that's been in the working for a while, right?
It's, yeah, I've definitely had like different versions, but I never put it into like the true like glove format until I think the last like 2 weeks, honestly, which has been super. It's like a fun, man. Yeah, it's super. I don't know if it will reach over here.
Here, I can move the camera, but basically
temporarily.
Yeah.
Agree. Hell yeah.
So what is the glove?
It's like it's just like a MIDI controller pretty much. Dang, my lights aren't turning on. I don't know, it's funny. It's like, it's just a MIDI controller. It has what is it? A radio? No, it's a ultrasonic sensor, which you can use to do distance stuff, and then there's four force sensitive resistors, which just change like kind of the resistance based on how hard you press them. And then there's some like kind of bend sensor things, which when you bend your hand, it kind of like can tell how much it's bending. And then there's just some lights to try to make it, because I'm calling it the Infinity Gauntlet, because I think it's just an awesome like. And then Yeah, and then there's the key is the gyroscope accelerometer that's kind of under the microcontroller
And
that,
I'm assuming that basically allows you to like control it
yeah,
with the
like
hand
move it.
movements.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Which is kind of the key. And then there's just a microcontroller in it that converts it all to MIDI format and just kind of scales it properly. So in the end, you can use control Touch Designer or Max or like anything with it really, which is fun. I'm like bummed out whoa, the lights aren't working for it. I'm like kind of want to reprogram it now, but I feel like there's other there's other times to do that. Wait, is
Oh,
it?
I just saw a light.
There it is. Ha, it's kind of hard to see with the camera, but yeah, it's super fun. I think it's a fun, like, especially with trumpet playing. I'm gonna try to be like playing because you can play trumpet with just the right
Yeah.
hand. So he's like, and
And then manipulating the effects with that.
yeah,
So this is a musical thing, but you've also, I believe you mentioned that this could also be used in like a visual aspect as well.
yeah. Which
Have you ever tried to use this for a show, like doing lighting
No,
for a
but I
show?
actually might. I'm doing visuals at the only thing I'm doing visuals at a show on a Saturday, but I think it's gonna be like super practical vibes. So
Yeah.
I think I might not try. But I mean, who knows? Maybe if I can get it like scaled right, like for a practical setting, that could be fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically I'm just trying to like kind of sync that up with my other prototype, and then this foot controller I'm making to make kind of a comprehensive like system for just controlling stuff and doing cool sound stuff.
Yeah. And
It's
then
fun.
the other aspect of it is you also make your own music under EMGOR, right?
Yeah, EMGOR vibes.
What's the writing process for that? Like, cause you made an album last year that had a lot of
Yeah.
different people on it. Is it
Yeah.
mainly like, do you have the compositions fully complete, or do you have like a little speck of something and then throw it at like people you think would be good for the slot? Which
That was a
way?
huge aspect of it
Yeah.
that I thought was super fun was, yeah, and even just stuff where like my friend Tobias would just be, we were just recording just kind of random stuff, and I would just kind of take something and chop it up and then give it to someone else, and then take what they do and chop that up like a ton, and take like pretty much everything that people recorded on it is very like
Spur of the moment.
hyper. Well, yeah, for sure that, but then also just like hyper chopped up. And,
Oh,
like,
okay.
there's just tons of like, I think there was one, the bass player Paul, like shout out Paul, probably had the only like full take in the whole thing, because he just kind of sat down and like first it was this really out kind of song, and he just like went totally out and got like a full take, but everyone else is pretty much like hyper chopped up, which was just kind of funny. But then some of it was very like specific, where, and I mean that's part of it too, is chopping what people would do up to match like my intention versus, so it's kind of a blend of like the artistic intention in that way of, instead of trying to force someone to play something exactly how I hear it, like having everyone play things exactly how they kind of instinctively hear it, and then chopping it up and like using Ableton to bring it closer to what I would do, so that it's kind of in the middle in that
That's really cool.
way.
Yeah.
I love that kind of, but it's interesting. I think that album is very, because it's like every song is a different like genre and a different group,
Yeah.
and it's super like it's almost like, I think like kind of scientific, like it's just kind of like doing a bunch of different like musical experiments and trying to see like what sticks in people's heads and stuff. But I have some new music that is going to be a lot more like a cohesive kind of EP or whatever, that has like one specific vibe and similar instrumentation and everything, which it's interesting. I feel like the way that uh like when people make art, it can be so like removed from like the aspect of communicating with people and like bringing feelings to other people. Like there's so many other reasons I feel like that can distract us from like really making like art for art's sake and to communicate and everything. And it definitely, it feels like it was a really fun album, but in a way it was definitely kind of missed the artistic, like it was very explorative and fun, but it wasn't, I don't think it was really like, I don't know, it's easy to judge art, so and it's
Yeah.
easy to be too hard on your own art, so it's, I don't, but yeah, I'm definitely in the future just focused really hard right now on like creating like especially creating songs and just structure that is like really worth like listening to, like and can like really like move.
People. Yeah.
Yeah, and like communicate like specific like, I don't know, like
Emotions,
thing.
feelings.
Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
So just a few more questions. Do you want to shout out any of the musicians who played on the album
Oh, I mean, like,
currently?
what is it? My friend Tobias is all over it. Matthew Drake is all over it. There's this song with, what is it? Tobias, Abby, and Paul is like super. That's like one of my favorites. And like, and I'm trying to think. I mean, there's so many people. Like my friend George is like one of my favorite sax players ever, and he like just rapped on it. And then my other friend George like did punk kind of vocals on it, and there's my old neighbor played violin on it. It's, I feel like it. I feel like I can't even remember everyone, but it's shout out everyone
That's
on
great.
that. It's really beautiful. I think it matters like so much to me, like everyone who played on it, and it that people like would believe in me and trust their like time and effort into my art is like beautiful. I feel like that's kind of what it is all about in a way. Which is so, yeah, I'm super excited for the future stuff that I'm writing.
That's
And
great.
just all of that stuff is just, it like matters so much to me that it's beautiful vibes, I think.
And then, is there anybody that, because this Boston music scene, I do this in every interview at the end of it. Is there anybody in this music scene that you want to give a shout out to that you feel like is really inspiring you, or like that is making stuff that you feel like is really worthwhile to yourself and to other people, like, or somebody that you feel like needs more, like more people should know about, or something like that? Like, who are some people that have really been that you've really been digging on in this kind of Berkeley Alston music scene?
I'm trying to think. There's so many different people for so many different like reasons. I mean, I feel like Abby's stuff is definitely just like super inspired, and it's just one of those things where like I just really appreciate like going to a show and like really like, I don't know, when the music like really like communicate, like I guess I said that before, like it really like communicates something like vivid and like interesting, and but in a way it's not just like self-serving, like, I don't know, I can't really describe, I feel like right now, like what, but I mean, my friend Matthew Drake's stuff and my friend Ian's stuff. I feel like y'all's stuff, the Foxy Grandpa stuff, is super. It's so genuine and just like fun, like and I feel like there's something really like vivid that's being communicated in that. It's awesome.
Thank you, I
I'm
appreciate that.
I honestly, I feel like a lot of the time too, the people that have been the most inspiring to me are just people who can like yell just like really loud into like a microphone
And have
and
it
just
sound good.
just not give a fuck. Like that's the most
That's a beautiful way of
inspiring
putting it.
thing to me recently. And I think there's so many different like niches in the kind of Boston scene or whatever, and there's so many, but it's really interesting too, like certain players who like, especially horn players to me, where like it's one thing to play loud versus like to really scream into your instrument.
Yeah.
And there's just something really like, I feel like there's so many people that are so killing and like everything, but it just feels like a lot of people who are like so amazing like really lack the ability to like truly scream, like put like everything they like feel, like to the point where it starts sounding like bad kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because it seems like most people like stopping where things like start sounding worse than people stay to try to, I think I'm thinking like tone wise with trumpet
Yeah.
or sax or everything, like get it. And I just love hearing when people like really push the instrument into like where it starts to like break, and just pushing experience.
On that note, one of my favorite musical memories since moving to Boston was, do you know Nico Malinowski?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I went to go see his band. I've seen them a few times. They're called Flora now. They went by a different name, but this one show, it was for this EP release, and I just remember two things where I was like, whoa, because they make like really complicated music. Like I guess you could call it jazz, but it's like much
Yeah.
more than that. But it's like heavy metal jazz, I guess you could say. But the first one was during the first song of the set. Nico just like at one point just like shrieked as loud as he could,
Hell
like
yeah.
possibly could, while like everybody was playing, and it was so loud, like you could hear it over the band.
Oh,
and
Hell
it was
yeah.
so insane. And I was like, oh my god! And then later on, the saxophonist Anthony DeFeo Gelman, great sax player, but later on he took a solo, and at one point he literally just like he has like a little pedal board, and he just like he stomped on everything and just blew this like it sounded like a boat horn, and I was
Hell
like,
yeah,
I
dude.
really resonate with the like people who can just like really scream, not just be loud for being loud's sake, but like
Yeah.
really get guttural with it. So it's
That's
pretty
so
awesome.
real.
All right, you want to play some music,
Hell
dog?
yeah, man.
What are we gonna play? We talked about this
Okay.
like for 2 minutes.
Hell yeah. I could just play some chords and could see. Oh, did it stop? Damn. I might have to reset the input because I unplugged it. I could just play some like chords if you want to like play over it. I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, we'll just improvise. Or if you want to do something free, that's always welcome.
Hell yeah. Could just. Hell yeah. Just see what's up. Hell yeah. Sound.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, let's try it. Do whatever you feel like, man.
Whoa. Take my glasses off. Damn, I lost it.
Thanks for
Hell
coming
yeah.
on, man.
Thanks for
That was
having me,
great.
man. It's an honor to be a mug.